Well, folks, the impeachment Trump farce has ended once again, for the second time this time around, with once again Trump being acquitted on all charges. In a 57 to 43 vote, he has been completely acquitted of all of the charges brought against him by the impeachment managers. And no, he is not guilty by mob rule, by majority rule, for all of the complaining Democrats in the back who continue to try and claim that somehow we are a democracy and that we care so much about majority rule. Really, we don't. It has nothing to do with majority rule. But I don't want to talk about impeachment, and I don't want to stave off what really this video is about. And as you can see in the title and thumbnail, what it is about is speaking about Mitt Romney and complaining and completely destroying all of his arguments for why he voted to convict in this case. Because he, among 6 other spineless and politically opportunist Republicans, voted with him to convict Donald Trump of these laughable charges. And the response after this, and to be entirely clear, to preface this rant, I am not attacking Romney on a personal or religious level. As someone who holds the same religious views as him, I don't deign to judge him on those aspects when I have no knowledge of those aspects. I know nothing of him, and so I will not be making those points. However, I will be spending the majority share of this video speaking exactly about why I believe he is one of the worst politicians currently in national politics. And it begins with his explanation as to why he exactly did vote for this impeachment. Because he tries to justify this by saying, I'm a religious guy. I am so honored about the Constitution. Ho hum. Ooh, you're violating the Constitution, Donald Trump. That's what he's going on about. But this vote had nothing, in my view, to do with religiosity, as it falls afoul of not only one of my religion and his religion, the LDS Church's core tenets, but the entirety of Christianity and Judeo-Christianity more broadly's core tenets, and it being the 9th commandment in the 10 commandments, that being, thou shalt not bear false witness. And for anyone who was watching the impeachment trials, and particularly watched the great annihilation of all of the prosecutor's charges by the defense later on, as you all would know, the House impeachment managers absolutely, irrefutably, to the point where they didn't even try to rebut it in most cases, did bear false witness in many on occasion, and particularly something that's relevant to Mitt Romney, with regard to someone who is his co-senator from my state. They lied directly about a conversation that supposedly Mike Lee had with Donald Trump. And they lied about some of his comments on that front because of an anonymous source who they didn't even deign to fact check for even 2 seconds with someone who they have easy access to. And Mike Lee then comes up and says, well, that's a lie. And they don't even refute it. Because it turns out that where they got this from was a Washington Post article that was sourced by anonymous sources, which seems strange, because wouldn't you want to have more ironclad sources for what is a pseudo-criminal trial in this case? No, but of course that wasn't what this was about. This was about political animus towards Donald Trump, and that goes for every single one of the people who voted to convict him, yes, including Mitt Romney. Because Mitt Romney, throughout all of his time, has shown to be more than willing to be politically unscrupulous in many an occasion. For those of you who have a memory beyond 4 years, will remember the fact that he was going to dinners with Donald Trump in late 2016 after he won the presidency, probably job shopping to try and get a position in the administration. When he didn't get it, he went away for a few years and reemerged in 2018 as a never-Trump extraordinaire, all to win Utah's primary seat in a way very similar to John McCain in Arizona. As, you know, if it's the similarities to John McCain you want from a Mitt Romney, well, they come in spades. The guy doesn't even come from Utah. He's from Massachusetts. And he's carpetbagged to the state and pretends like he's some sort of native and represents Utah's general character on a broader margin. And though I would say that at least that is partially inaccurate, as Utah is more of a red state than even some Republicans give it credit for, he is right in a particular area, and this is where I get to the criticism of Utah at large, and the criticism of church culture, which I separate from church doctrine, as this isn't something that is really borne out in either the story of Joseph Smith or any of that sort of things, but I'm not going to get into the weeds there. Simply, I'm going to leave it at this. The criticism I have of much of Utah culture is that we value so much that people be soft-spoken, that people don't try and attack their political opponents or truly stand for what they believe in. That's why we can be fooled by a Mitt Romney type, because Mitt Romney is almost obsessed with the idea of not actually standing up for his views in favor of completely discarding them when it seems like it would be a little mean to assert them. And this is a problem across all of Utah culture. All right, if you want a perfect, crystal clear example of such, just look at how Southern Utah particularly has handled masks. All right, Southern Utah is one of the most red parts of the entire union. It is crazy red, and most of the people here do not believe the mask stuff. All right? But even still, you'll see upwards of 80 to 90% of people walking into stores with masks on. And you want to know the reason they do that? It's not because they believe that. It's not because they actually believe that masks aren't some form of paranoia. It's because they don't want to offend these people who, as far as I'm concerned, from all of my travels of not wearing a mask and going about my regular shopping, essentially, do not exist. I have yet to meet a single person, and this is coming from someone who is almost never wearing a mask outside of specifically work. I have never met anyone who actually told me to put on a mask when it wasn't their job. Never even once. And this is after months of doing this. So, Southern Utah is not pro-mask by and large, but we wear masks so much because of this fundamental aspect of our culture, which is just poisonous. And that is the aspect of our culture where we don't want to offend. We, in a large respect, represent a certain portion of PC culture. Not the portion of culture that goes around PC culture and cancel culture that goes around canceling people or actively involves themselves in screaming matches at people who try to even go against the progressive orthodoxy, but in fact the other side of such culture. And that is the side of the culture that, rather than going after these sorts of things, doesn't actually believe any of the progressive hegemony, but continues to follow it simply because we don't want to offend, or we don't want to stand up for our beliefs. And for a religion in which our founder was a martyr, who specifically never disavowed any of the things he said despite massive amounts of persecution, it is really, quite literally, a disgrace on our culture that is what we are doing in this present time. It truly is. Man. And Mitt Romney really does represent that. But to move on to something so I can get my mood off of this sort of criticism of Utah and move on to something that I'm actually really excited about in Utah, another story really. The Utah governor, and this is Spencer Cox we're talking about, has signed a bill allowing concealed carry of a weapon without a permit. And this makes me really happy because I didn't support Spencer Cox in the primary. Mostly because I thought he was kind of a rhino and I didn't quite like him. I supported Hughes instead. And I didn't expect him to sign any of these sorts of bills. So this is a really, really good thing. And, if this sort of trend continues and he doesn't do anything insane, I might actually end up voting for him next time. I don't know if I will. That might end up changing because he seems to be at least partially ingratiated in the progressive dogma. I don't think he's explicit in his calls for diversity, but he's kind of there. But this is a really good start. The particulars of the law is that when you get to the age of 21, you can concealed carry pretty much on public property without a permit. And Utah has particular laws which can disallow concealed carry on particular private property, depending on how they want that sort of thing to be done. And that's whatever. I don't mind not being able to conceal carry on private property that isn't mine, so that's not a problem. But this is a really good gun control bill, anti-gun control bill, I guess. And I hope that as the sort of Biden gun grabbing stuff continues to rage on and bubble beneath the surface as things like HR 127 continue to be in the House, and I hope it doesn't pass. But as these sort of things continue to live on, I hope that Utah will continue to be pro-gun in this instance, and in all of these sorts of instances. I hope that we continue this trend. And if it does continue, that's a good thing. Because our GOP, despite how much, and our culture, despite how much I disparaged it earlier, is not fully gone, all right? We're only on the first or second stage of becoming Arizona 2.0. We're not quite there yet, okay? If Mitt Romney stays in there for a few more terms, well, I imagine our GOP is going to be just about quite as bad as Arizona's in, say, 2010. It'll end up being really bad at that point. But I'm going to dedicate a whole lot of my time to making sure that doesn't happen, and making sure that Mitt Romney stays a one-term senator in my state. I don't really mind Mike Lee, if you couldn't tell. Mike Lee's fine. That's my opinion of him. He's fine, not offensive. I am annoyed that he didn't support the election challenges earlier on in January. But, he's someone I can rely on when it comes to actually passing good legislation. So I'm not going to split hairs over that sort of thing. And I don't want a purity spiral. But to move on to our next story, New Zealand puts their largest city into lockdown over 3 positive COVID-19 cases. Yeah, they're implementing a policy that the WHO and most health organizations at this point say should be a last resort because of 3 cases. 3! That's not even a full family, at least over in southern Utah land where I live. That's not even half a full family over here. It's nothing. It's 3 people. And full lockdown? Really? Over this? Over COVID-19? Are we really doing this? I need to burrow into the minds of much of the English-speaking world, which continues to labor under the delusion that lockdowns actually work. I really need to do that, because so many of these people are not only ignoring many reasonable people who question the efficacy of lockdowns from the very beginning, but they're also now, at this point, questioning the efficacy of the actual establishment scientists, of people like the WHO, of people like the CDC. They're going against all of these sort of things. And this is also in a time where worldwide COVID cases are plummeting. They continue to plummet. Now, I say they're plummeting in at least partially because they've changed the way they do tests. But that's not all. Obviously, it's going down as well. I don't think that accounts for 100% of the drop. It certainly accounts for much of the drop, and depending on how conspiratorial you want to be, it may even be reasonable to claim that it accounts for 100% of the drop. But even in that case, even if it was 100% of the drop, and COVID cases are still right where they were back in early January, this is still unreasonable. 3 cases from one of your largest cities? What? That doesn't make sense. 3 cases that we don't even know are serious. Utterly ridiculous. And New Zealand has been one of the worst on this instance. They've shut down their whole country on multiple occasions because of 6 cases. So this isn't a new thing, but it is something that continues to infuriate every reasonable person on the planet. But to move on to our last story. Lindsey Graham is saying that Trump is excited for 2022 and wants to rebuild the Republican Party. And assuming that this is accurate, and I have no reason to assume that Lindsey Graham is not still at least in partial contact with Donald Trump and would know at least a bit of his feelings on the matter, it seems as though Donald Trump is not going to be pursuing a third party, at least at this point. And I think that this is fine. I've always been on the fence with regard to third party or rebuild the Republican Party to not be the worst. And the reason I've been in the fence with this is because both strategies are fundamentally good, are fundamentally useful, and could fundamentally work given the right amount of push and enough consolidation around a single strategy. So, seeing this sort of thing happen, I am going to say it right now, we need to focus on rebuilding the Republican Party, since that seems to be what Trump wants to do, and assuming that this doesn't change in the future. Since that seems to be what Trump wants to do, we should focus on doing that as well. We need to consolidate our efforts. If we splinter off into a bunch of different areas, and no, I'm not talking about, if we splinter off the establishment and the non-establishment GOP, we'll never win an election again. That's not what I'm talking about. But rather, if we split off a bunch of the populace, a bunch of the people who are behind what Donald Trump stands for, not Donald Trump specifically, by the way, for all the people who claim that somehow people who support Donald Trump are cultists, it's not about Donald Trump, it's about what he represents, just to be clear. For the people who do agree with that sort of thing and want to continue forward with that sort of representation, we cannot deconsolidate our strategies. Now, in particular states or localities, these things might differ. I am still of the opinion that if you wanted to have a third party become legitimate and become viable on a national scale, you need to start from a state and local scale. All right? I've made this point before, but if you're going to have a third party that would actually function and would actually work and not meander about at 1 to 5% nationally, like the Libertarian Party or literally any other third party in this country, you need to start at the local level. You need to get a couple city councils in a state. You need to start getting that state's localities. You need to start getting that state's state houses. You need to get their their state senates. You need to start getting their state governorships. You need to start getting all of that sort of stuff in just 1 or 2 states, because you need to be able to consolidate where you're focusing yourself. Because once you have that done, once you've completed the takeover of one state to the point where either the Republican or the Democrat Party is a non-factor in those elections, well, that brings a lot of momentum to the stage and allows you to bring that momentum to the national stage. Because what it would allow you to do is that is something that has not been done in a very, very long time, where fully a third party has taken over a state. It hasn't happened in a very long time. And if it did happen, well, you'd get a lot of free media coverage. People would be talking about it all the time. And if you do that, then you can continue that on and continue that forward to taking more states. And you gotta choose your state, obviously. It can't just be any state. I don't think it would be very effective in Utah or even Arizona or that sort of thing. You need to take a specific state. I'd say Alaska is actually a good option. Reason being is that Alaska is already amenable to sort of having a third party or independent candidate already, and so they are more likely to actually gel with that sort of thing. So that's what you need to start. But of course, that doesn't seem to be where Donald Trump is going. He seems to be on the path of rebuilding the Republican Party, and that is not a bad idea. As I've said before in other venues, and I think I've even said it here, we cannot contain all of the Republican Party within the perception of the RNC. Because the RNC is incredibly corrupt, is a part of the monoparty, and all that sort of stuff. Everything people saying about the RNC is 100% true. But that sort of perception of the RNC does not necessarily apply to state GOPs. A good example of this at this point is actually the modern AZ GOP, where the modern AZ GOP is very good, very based and all that sort of stuff. And they don't seem to be cowards at all. They went to immediately censure people like Meghan McCain and the like. They did that immediately as soon as these sorts of things started popping up. They don't seem to be cowards. And so why should we get rid of them? Well, we shouldn't. And that goes for a whole bunch of state GOPs. I don't know every single one in particular, but many of them do apply in this instance. And so that's what you need to start doing. And if you are in a state which has a bad GOP, and my state, while it's not there yet, is currently on its way to getting there, you need to focus your efforts on changing your state GOP or your local GOP. Because once you start doing that, it starts making its way up to the RNC. Because suddenly the RNC can't ignore it anymore. Because suddenly all of these state GOPs are censuring all of these national politicians who bow to the RNC and the Mono Party. Once that starts happening, well, the RNC looks and says, well, it seems like our entire base doesn't actually want us to do what we're doing, so let's stop doing it. And that's what will happen, in all likelihood. Or they'll just stop existing. Because state GOPs have a great influence over who wins primaries. They really do. So that sort of thing can be really effective. And that's what I suggest we all do. That's what I suggest if we are going to rebuild the GOP from within. That's what we need to focus our efforts on. Local and state campaigning. That's what we need to focus on. And that's where I'm going to leave us all today. If wherever you are, if you like that video, subscribe. Wherever you are, if you're on BitChute or Brighteon or Minds or wherever you are, follow me on Gab. If you're on YouTube, go literally anywhere else. I don't care about YouTube. But that's where I'm going to leave you guys today. This has been Breaking on the Daily. I'm Kel Kidman, and I'm out.